Today, I'm joined here again by Jameson Proctor of Athletics, as well as Richard Lehman, also from Athletics, where we are going to be diving even deeper into some of the amazing things that they're doing, building tools with AI, doing the thing, riding the wave. Excited to see what else we can share here. So, Jameson, with that, I will shut up, stop share, and hand it over to you.
All right, Josh, thanks so much. And as Josh said, I'm joined by my good friend and colleague, Richard Lehman. He actually
Nice.
does most of the cool stuff. I generally just talk about it and think about it. So I thought for, a Friday session where we could kind of like really deep dive into some product and talk about, how we actually make the proverbial sausage. It'd be cool to have Richard hang out with us. Um, Real quick, just to give you a quick sense of what we're going to do today, we'll give you a little bit of background on who we are and some of what we've been building at Athletics. And then we'll jump into a demo of a product called Sesame that we've been developing, which is really focused on motion design and motion production. And then we'll talk about how this sort of like continuing wave of generative AI has really influenced the way that we're thinking and building, and talk about some APIs we've incorporated, how they kind of show up in the product, and how we're actually incorporating them. Richard, anything you would add to that?
No, I think that sounds great. Yeah,
All
excited to
right.
show you guys.
Yeah, I'll share my screen real quick. I'll take us through a couple of slides, and then Richard will actually jump into Sesame. All right, let's see if I do this right today. Very cool. All right. So, I'm the CEO and a partner at the Brand Innovation Studio Athletics. We like to say that we partner with industry leaders to create lasting value in a rapidly changing world. And that's one of the reasons why we've kind of moved into more of a tools, not rules philosophy. We do a lot of brand strategy and brand identity work, and that work really needs to go beyond guidelines and really get into people's hands in a way where they can use it and have an impact. Yeah, we help clients design their place in the world. You can see from this sizzle reel here on the bottom right, we love motion design. And really, that's where the idea of building a tool like Sesame came out of. We like to say that brands get to work when they're purposeful, original, and useful. And those last two pieces, original and useful, again, are really important seeds into the product that we've been building. We want people to be able to show up in a way that's authentic and original to their organization and what they're trying to do. And we want to help them do that by putting useful systems, strategies, and tools into their hands. We like to build things like this. This is some work that we did some years ago with Citrix. If any of you are familiar with Citrix, I think that the idea of like 3D audio visualizers and generative audio tools like you see over here in the bottom left may not necessarily square up with what we think about them as a brand, but they were really, really excited about how they engage their internal teams and really bring them along for the ride during the course of a major global rebrand. So we got to have some fun. We worked just after the pandemic with Square, the global payments company. They were at the tail end of a major rebrand. They didn't have any motion, so we designed a set of motion ideals and principles for them. Then as we were doing that, we all realized that they didn't really have the resources internally to take those motion principles to market. So we had the opportunity to prototype and then build a product called Auto. You can see Auto here on the bottom left, and it's a web-based motion design and production tool. And you can see these other images that we have here are some exhibits that came out of Auto. Also had a chance to work with IBM. We've worked with IBM for almost a decade at this point, and I had a chance for their Tech Exchange conference to build a graphic tool on top of the processing programming language. And this tool, as you can see, has a number of parameters that designers and other folks can interact with to produce some of the exhibits that we're seeing here. And, you know, all of this over the course of the past 5+ years led to this platform, Sesame, that we've developed. You know, it's purpose built for motion design. It's, you know, there's an idea here that not only can we accelerate ideation, production, and iteration, we can also ensure that the assets that are being produced from the tool are tightly governed, so they're on brand, and we can invite people into the design process that maybe historically haven't had a seat at the table, whether that's corporate communications or marketing or social media managers. It's really taking the motion design process and democratizing it to a certain degree. Here's just some example outputs. We're not actually outputs, just some production screens of Sesame, Google, AIGA, Fidelity Investments, Cisco, and kind of run the gamut. You know, the Cisco exhibit you see there on the bottom right was really an experiment with 3D that went sort of in correlation with a color exploration that we were doing. On the bottom left, you'll see this work from Fidelity, which is very much marketing asset focused. And the idea here is I can get in here with a really tightly focused and scoped set of inputs and create motion assets that, again, are really on brand and on demand. None of this is particularly revolutionary, but you know, these are the kind of the parts and pieces that make up the product platform. Baked into kind of the core of Sesame is this idea of a responsive canvas. So we see dimensions over here on the left. I think to date we have 14 different sets of dimensions and aspect ratios. So when you have a template or a component in Sesame, it's not constrained to a single aspect ratio or set of dimensions. Something that you produce in 1920 by 1080 can also be produced in a 500 by 500 1x1 to be used in social media. The real core of the platform are these components, these templates. These are basically motion designs that have been converted to React components. They have a set of parameters, inputs, that allow for a degree of scoped editing, background color, font face, font weight, image assets, video assets, etc. And then finally, the tool renders these assets, everything from a 10 frame per second GIF up to a 60 frame per second MP4 file. And the thing that I would say about that is nothing. That's sort of the nuts and bolts of it. I guess what was on my mind though is one of the things that I'm not always clear about is This is a browser-based tool. It runs in browser. It is not running off of a server. It's not running off of a distributed application. That was born out of the work that we did with Square on Auto. We wanted something that was lightweight and really, really easy to distribute, because we really felt that that lowered the barrier of entry and really got people into the tool, experimenting and creating assets. Richard, before I hand it over to you, and I think I have maybe one more slide, is there anything else that you would add?
No, I think that sounds good. I mean, I'm sure the demo will answer a lot of questions too. So
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Thanks for that. And when we think about the impact of a tool like this, again, it allows organizations to maintain cohesive brand behaviors that anyone on the team can develop. You can create and output assets from almost any touch point. Um, it's again this idea of bringing people into the creative process. We empower teams to be valuable contributors to your brand. Um, that idea of it being a browser-based tool, being extremely lightweight and distributable. You can create the workflows are accessible anywhere in the world. And at the end of the day, it's fast. It increases output, it increases design variations, it shortens time to market. I think in today's attention economy, being able to put purpose-built tools like this that are streamlined into the hands of organizations can be a real differentiator. So I know I went through that really quickly, but really I want to make time for Richard to kind of deep dive into the tool. So jump in there and as questions arise, feel free to drop them into the chat. We're going to make sure that we save a good chunk of time towards the end to just have a bit of a conversation.
Okay, cool. Can everybody see my screen? Great. Yeah. So, as Jameson says, this is a browser-based application called Sesame. This is kind of the default screen as you've logged in. This is a user-based system with privileges and different assets and things like that based on a user account. One of the main things that you're kind of met with is this idea of collections. So we have a bunch of different clients and different project work. They're all put into little collections on Sesame with different assets, different users, and different components. And that's like a big part of how this whole thing works is we've made little bespoke components for each different project that render differently, have different frameworks. It's all, based on whatever the project that we've been using it for. So I'm going to just demo some of the stuff that we've done for our own identity at athletics. This is kind of one of the bigger collections that as we've kind of built the tool, we've kind of ate our own dog food, as you would say, kind of as we're using our own software. This is kind of a really good base little document timeline where you can see you have a timeline, a sidebar, and a kind of stage area. And so if we hit play, you get this kind of sound kind of came in there. I don't know if you heard that. I'll turn that off right now. But so you have this stage of components, and this was just like as I've saved it, the state of all the components that I put on it. I could easily add, put in. This is one of my favorites. So I can just put in. So this is a 3JS React 3 fiber for all the nerds out there. React component that just sits in between other different. This is basically React and HTML and video. They all kind of live in this different world of the timeline, and I can rearrange them. In this case, I can change the duration, extend it, and then I can also do things like have the output. I'm gonna move this down. So I can see here in this little label here, it's 1920 by 1080, but I can go to dimensions and I have a whole host of different things here, different aspect ratios, different presets. And where this kind of differentiates from things like in Adobe or other design tools is we have this kind of responsive philosophy, maybe born from the web of how these assets should live. They actually respond just like you would in media queries in CSS to different layouts. So right now we're at 1920 by 1080, but I can change this whole aspect ratio to be 1080 by 1920. Now it's that portrait style, and I can play the timeline. All the assets are still there, but they've just responded to their new layout. So this gives you a lot of power in terms of rendering out different assets for different aspect ratios, different platforms. All of these are, this isn't prescriptive in any way. These are just presets that we've come across that we think are useful. The other thing is that it's responsive in size. If I look at the spinning A here at 1920 by 1080, that 16 by 9 aspect ratio, it looks like this. But if I go to 40 by 360, which is tiny, it still takes up the same amount. The same with the text. The font sizes are all responsive. We're all using these kind of responsive units across the whole system when we're designing things. The other thing is that, we are animators and we like After Effects and things like that. But for a tool like this, we really thought about governance, really thinking about how we can bring our brands to life and give tools that are easy to use. So we kind of came up with this single layer timeline. I know it's nothing new, but it's very simple. Like it doesn't have this ability to really fine tune, layering on top of each other. It's this very simple system of if I want this clip to be in front of this clip, it moves in front of it, swaps its duration, swaps its position in the timeline, and then it has this, butted up to the one next to it. So you don't get these gaps or anything like that. So we're trying to get the best possible outputs. And then the other part of it is that you have the ability, just with the dimensions, you have the ability to render at different formats. You have MP4, WebM, and GIF, and frame rates 12, 15, 30, and 60. So, just to give you an idea of what that's like, it's just like, so it doesn't take too long. I'm just going to take off all of these components and just show you this one here. And play it. These are some of our clients. And then you see what happens when I hit render. It basically parses all the frames that it sees in the stage, and then it encodes it, and then you basically get an MP4. And then the other part of it is it's parameterized. So I can say, I'm added something in here, and I can move that around if I want to. I can increase the font size, and I can render it again. But we've thought about other, responsive scenarios. So this is an interesting component that we've been working on, where you might have a scenario where you're showing an asset with some text at a certain aspect ratio. And in this case, I have an asset, but I also have the ability to add another asset. So if I look at this at 16 by 9, you can see how it's cropped and everything as it plays. But when I do a dimension that's square, we came up with this concept where, maybe this background kind of collapses and then the text overlays over the image. And as we were talking about it, we thought about, well, maybe in some cases, you have a face or something like that. Maybe you want a responsive image. So we come up with a situation where we can basically say, for the aspect ratio, you can have a asset that's kind of fine-tuned for that aspect ratio. So in this case, I'm just going to crop this just as an example. So what happened here is it's not in any order or anything like that. The Sesame system has basically chosen the asset that's closest to the actual stage dimensions. So you can do a lot of things where when you're actually changing your dimensions, you can say, okay, I want to use this asset. I can prove that further if I just choose this one instead. Oh, I guess. Oh. All right. Well, that all right. I guess that has failed then. Sorry. But anyway, the idea is that uh the asset would be tuned for the stage dimensions that you have. We'll look into that bug. It was working earlier. Sorry about that. Yeah, and then the other thing is we have all sorts of different kinds of collections. So that was kind of your more mainstream kind of video assets and branding, and then we have some interesting stuff that we've done for this new art gallery Goka, where we're playing with P5JS, and then we're actually taking the inputs, and then we're doing an image filter on top of the image. Um, if I change this to another asset, it does the same effect, but it's all rendered the same way using the Sesame system. It's all bespoke to whatever we want. We can make anything. Anything's agnostic. Um, it's a little bigger. Yeah, so this was P5JS as the framework that it was written in. It downloads just the same. So this is a HD video. And so, with some of those other more interesting components from that collection, you have this scenario where we have like an image input that's doing some generative manipulation, and we can play with that, but you can also it's parameterized, so we could switch that to the other asset. You can start to play with things and really make really generative fun assets for your client and things like that. So that's how we've been using it a lot internally, is just making assets. We also have a really because it's our own product, we have this ability to add other features to it that where other commercial software might not. So in this case, this gallery had certain needs where they wanted to do big print um, kind of banners. And so one of the designers was like, oh, we need to take some of this generative stuff, but pixels is just too, we can't make it big enough. I was like, well, I think I could generate SVG data. And so we added this button that basically takes whatever in Sesame and in this stage area, and then turns it into an SVG. So then you have this ability, nothing is really, you just have these kind of kit of parts in terms of Sesame being, a timeline, a stage, and parameters, and then the output is whatever we want it to be, and really trying to keep it as agnostic as possible, so we can really make it as playful or as custom bespoke as we want. Yeah, but all of these different things, I think you saw me playing with, the cell size, background colors, and things like that. Any set of parameters can be applied to, whatever components that we want, if that makes sense to everybody. But yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
One of the things we're thinking about too is, as we continue to use and develop the platform, we're starting to think about how others might be able to use the platform. And, we haven't gotten there yet, but Richard, you recently talked to me about this idea of eventually being able to lazy load React components
Mhm.
outside of the core system so that people could develop their own templates and components that could be used inside the platform.
Yeah, as I was saying, that everything is kind of, basically staged inside of these component collections rather, and these are probably going to be called templates moving forward, but components is, almost like if you were in Final Cut or Premiere, your clips, your movie clips, except these are all, smart in that they have all of the different parameters that you can change inside of them. So I could add as many of the same component as I want, this object-oriented programming concept, and extend the timeline as much as I want. and I can also make as many components as I want, you know. It's just how I provision them to different collections and things like that.
Yeah, I love the way that sort of like deep experience on one hand with creative tools and deep experience with the semantic web and the responsive web sort of come together in a way that produces something that is perhaps a little bit different from the creative tools that we're familiar with.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's really just really empowering to be able to use the web this way. I think like it's the most, pliable, coding environment. Yeah, that for me personally, but I think it's just offered so many different rendering possibilities in terms of the design community that, that we've really just tried to empower. Like I said, P5JS using that or using just native HTML and JavaScript. And when like I even was showing you that spinning A, that's a 3JS component. So even bringing 3D, but kind of the world's our oyster in terms of that space. We really just can kind of keep adding different frameworks and playing with it. And we wanted to create a platform that really didn't have any rules, that just really needed time-based rendering, things like that.
Maybe let's shift gears for a second.
Sure.
And because I think that, as we developed this, and we felt that we were on to something. Really, what happened is, I think a lot of us have seen this, right? But in 2024, there was really this sort of watershed moment for the adoption of generative AI. So many tools really gained a lot of steam. And so we're building a purpose-built motion platform, and now we're having to think about, hey, how does this fit in to the landscape as it's evolving at probably the fastest rate of change that we've all experienced? And we're kind of, oh man, where'd my slide go? I lost my giant singularity slide. Um, but I basically had a big generative AI slide of the fact that we've reached this sort of moment. We're getting close to Ray Kurzweil's singularity. And for us, even though we are experimenting with every tool that was on that previous slide and others, where we really landed with Sesame was starting to bring in Adobe Firefly and the Adobe Firefly Services API. Now, why did we do that? That's really blurry, but first and foremost, Mac, what is it, System 6, 1990, Adobe Photoshop. We've been using Adobe for the entirety of our creative careers, so they're a trusted partner. We're very familiar with them. But beyond that, I think that if you listen to the way in which we think about Sesame and the way that it empowers our clients, one of the things that we see with Adobe and the way in which they're thinking about Firefly is that there's some real resonance, some real parity. Eliminate repetitive production work, automate end-to-end production workflows, maintain high quality and control, and produce content that is safe for commercial use, right? I mean, that's a question that we get each and every day from our clients about generative AI. Yeah, but can I use it? Is it safe? And, luckily, Adobe has done a lot of that hard work for us. I won't get into the details about how they do that. I mean, part of it is that it is trained on the Adobe stock library that they have, full copyright permission for. Part of it is they've already, in a very short, period of time, generated billions and billions of generations that just continue to feed into the model. Um, Again, when I think about the way in which I talk about this with my clients and the way in which I talk about it in the context of Sesame, one, the model is responsibly trained. Two, we're very confident in the level of security and the protection of privacy. There's a great deal of content transparency. Adobe's been leading initiatives around content transparency for quite some time. The models have diverse representation, which is critical. There's accountability there, and there's even sustainability. They're thinking about the actual energy consumption of the models and all of the farms required to power those models. So it's not nothing. So far, and Richard will jump into this here in a second, we're really, in some ways, right at the tip of the iceberg. Like when I look at the product documentation for Adobe Firefly services, and I think about everything that we could be bringing into our creative workflows and the tools we use. Right now, what we've successfully implemented is the Generate Image API, which is a text-to-image API, the Style Image Reference API, which allows you to bring in image reference that influences your generation. Style presets, which, this is another aspect of the Firefly offering that has been growing exponentially. I remember when it first launched, there were a few presets. Now it feels like there's a few dozen. Generate similar image API, where we're able to use an image that is in the Sesame media library and generate an image based on that. Very useful, again, from that idea of having to generate content at volume and be able to iterate and test. And that last slide is something I forgot to delete, that last bullet. When we think about APIs to explore, Richard didn't get into this, but we've been bringing now video with original audio into the platform. So if you've got a talking head video of a key opinion leader and you need that that talk track preserved in the render, that is something that we've just launched with Sesame. Adobe has got a really science fiction sort of auto dub and lip sync feature, which, if you think about needing to localize assets for global markets, that could be a really, really useful feature. We're looking at generative expand. Richard kind of touched on the idea of the responsive image. Well, what if you have something that the original asset is a 1x1? And you need to also have it fill a 16:9. The generative expand can use AI to expand that image to the additional space in the canvas. Generative fill, being able to actually produce new backgrounds for images, and the Substance 3D API, which allows you to essentially apply generative AI to 3D objects. And the amazing thing, and again, I think the reason why, besides sort of familiarity and safety and responsibility, another thing, and Richard, you can speak to this, we've been really, really impressed about how well documented and how easy to implement the APIs are. You kind of, when you put that on the scale and you think about the unlocks that they're providing and the power they're providing, being able to do that in a really, really straightforward way with really well-lit documentation is extremely valuable. And you don't always get that with some of the flavor of the day products that are out there that are still really establishing themselves and are really just running at full pace at that singularity. Richard, I think that's all I've got there. So let me pass it back over to you, man.
Sure.
Should we open up for questions? Oh no, you guys are going?
I was just gonna show quickly the Firefly
Oh, right on.
integration. We showed this a little bit at Jameson's last Future Spaces talk. This was a little demo that we made for you guys. But the thing that's interesting about our Firefly integration was that we were thinking about, how that would tie into Sesame, and we've just been really integrating that into this kind of modular media library. So basically, we have a silhouetted image here, and then I could basically say, I want to, again, if we think about the collections concept and how that, is tied to different assets and things like that, we wanted the kind of AI prompting to also work that way too. So inside the Future Spaces collection, we have this media library. You can see some of the assets that were generated. They're all black and white silhouettes. But then when I go to generate an image with Firefly, this is basically something that I've set up on the back end that said, I just want a donut that's black and white. This is just something that I found that was the best to get me the results that I needed. So then if I write dog as a prompt to Firefly to get response back, this basically goes to the Firefly API, uh, gets me 4 images of a dog that I can pick, um, like this one. And so then I can add this back to the image library and choose this. I can do any kind of cropping that I need to do. Um, let's crop it a little closer. And then, oops, sorry. So then that becomes what the particles are reading in this, this is again another P5JS thing, but why we started with this concept was that, it's kind of interesting with what AI has been able to do. It's so vast and the outputs are so impressive. This concept is kind of born out of something else using the black and white image silhouette for another client called Intuitive, where we just needed to make particles kind of fill different geometric shapes. And I was playing around with using AI. And then the idea of kind of governing AI to use our parameters can be kind of a gnarly task. So I think it's quite impressive that we can get it to generate these very simple silhouettes. Some of the things that we do on the back end is that, we'll basically have when I didn't just prompt a dog, as you might imagine, that would be kind of weird that's all that came back. But what's happening is I'm actually giving a prompt from the back end that gets also appended to that prompt, that I can curate as long as I want to. So this was actually the intuitive one. It is pretty simple of a prompt, black logo, mostly white background, and then you use that donut shape, or you could say another set of different assets that we add to our media library as a reference image. But we thought that was a kind of a good litmus test for, getting other responses from the Firefly. We can get much more. If we go into another collection here, I'll go into the Fidelity collection. You can kind of see here an asset for some people on a surfboard. I can say, generate similar image, and I can choose that asset from my media library, and I can generate similar. And, it's not just this kind of clip art that Firefly can generate. It can also generate, very vivid imagery. So just wait for that to, pretty wild the results you can get. Again, I think we're trying to curate it into our design work, so it's hard to know if, how we're going to use it per se, but like this is just the power that we have and how we're using it. It's really just cracking the surface of it.
Hey, Richard, real quick before we open
Sure.
it up, can you touch on you've basically touched on reference images. Can
Hmm.
you touch on the style presets as well?
Yeah. So, I mean, I've only, kind of delved into it a little bit, but basically, Adobe's API has, you can request what aspect ratio you want. That's kind of obvious. But you also have a whole host of things that I keep these things very like if I was if we went back to that silhouette concept and I really bumped up the visual intensity here, we'd stop seeing it as like that, referenced off the donut anymore. It'd start to be more of like, stylized, by kind of more of the popularity of what people are searching for and style strength. These are just kind of the different parameters that I've kind of gotten to keep it at bay to get the things that I want. But they also have, tons of things like that come out of Firefly. I can basically say something, make look something look like it's made in pastels just by, clicking that preset. So it's very, very powerful. This isn't by any means trying to say that, Sesame is like using this at any part of its volume yet. We're very, in beginning surface of it, beginning part of it, but you can do anything with it right now. And, like Jameson said, it's very good with in terms of client work because of the royalty-free issues and things like that. So it's been very impressive.
Yeah, and the one other thing I'll say is, I first experienced Firefly on the web, and one of the things I'm really impressed with the Adobe Firefly Services API is how much of that web application they're making available through the API. So again, controls like visual intensity, style strength, the aspect ratios, the content types of art or photography, all of these presets. Again, that's the library that's been growing exponentially over time. I'm always impressed to see what else they've added to that. And all of that is not all of it, but the vast majority of that is directly accessible in this API and really easy to implement. So maybe we'll stop there and use the rest of the time we have to answer some questions and have a chat.
Right. Amazing. So one question I think everyone had is how can they get a hold of this? Can they kick the tires?
Richard, do you want me to answer that? All right. So we'll drop
Yes, I
we
do.
will we'll drop a link into the chat, and I'm sure Josh will distribute it afterwards. The What we're sharing right now is a very sort of limited feature set instance of Sesame, but you can still get on there and play around and then do some fun stuff with it. Um, you could, if you're interested, um, you could go to sesame.design and give us your email address. And we're ramping up on a couple of things. One, um, starting to really broadcast what's being produced in Sesame. And then two, starting to think about what an early access program might look like. I mean, one of the things that we've done with Sesame, even though, a lot of our clients are enterprise or growth stage clients, we want to build a platform that goes from the individual user and up. And so as we think about early access and we think about what we're eventually going to go to market with, we will have individual plans for Sesame.
Amazing.
That's
Uh,
Richard. Richard's going to yell at me after this.
Hands off. So I'm going to try something a little bit different. So if you have a question, just go camera on and like raise your hand. Or if you want to ask, if you want me to ask, just like DM me in the chat and then I'll ask for you. So I think that's like an easy kind of way to differentiate that. In the meantime, if anybody doesn't have any questions, I'll start peppering you with some stuff. So Jameson, so
Yes.
you are creating, or and also like you guys are creating like actual software. Um, like when did this become possible for agencies to do this? Like, was this because the tooling got to a certain point? Is this because of like AI Copilot? Like what allowed us to get to this point where you guys could be like actually like building legit software?
Let's do like a two-part answer because I'll give a high-level answer and I'd love to hear from Richard because he has the real answer. Um, for me, it kind of goes back to this idea of, I think we've talked about this in the not too distant past, Josh, the idea of um, the capability of the web itself. It's a combination of the machines that we're using, the browsers that we're using, all of the infrastructure. But again, we're really leveraging web programming to build these tools. Richard, keep me honest here because that's a really high level answer on my part.
I think that's, the core of it. I mean, I think you know, it's interesting you say AI for that. I mean, I think, for me as a developer in my career, I think when the web started using React is like when that inflection point for, when you can make applications, like I think about, Slack as, an Electron app that was a web application, things like that that we use all the time. And things like React have just made it so much, you can make a React app that can make an iPhone app. Things are very much not just web oriented in terms of that space. The web application world is just, it's software development, but it starts, I think my answer would probably be React, I think, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, so this is again kind of going down a different kind of rabbit hole maybe, but I mean, so how do you I mean, like 5 years from now, do you think that this is gonna do you think there's gonna be a change in the type of work that we're doing as agencies? I mean, are we making websites? Are we making software for people? Are we making content that we're using our own tooling? Like, what's what do you have any predictions?
Now you're really
Are you
putting me
willing to share?
now you're putting
That
me
might
on the
be
spot. I mean, I'll give you one thing that I keep kind of coming back to in so many conversations these days. I think that we're seeing an interesting equilibrium point being established. So, you know, there was over the past 5, 10 years a very serious focus and investment in performance marketing.
Mhm.
Really thinking about what's happening at the bottom of the funnel, and we're going to use measureship to really just drive conversion. And I go back to the Airbnb story a couple of years ago of them saying, "Hey, we're seeing diminishing returns on our performance marketing spend, and we need to really lean into brand and branded content." Now, what's really happening is the pendulum's starting to rest somewhere in between. So that's one sort of continuum that I'm very much focused on. Alongside of this, we have the unlock that generative AI has provided, and the commodification, the blanding that goes along with it.
Yeah.
And so, to answer your question, I think that it's going to look a lot different. We're not going to be doing the things that we're doing right now. For us as an agency, it goes back to this idea of uh, making brands that get to work, right? Really equipping our clients to go out there and do the thing. And understanding that the moment the thing leaves the door, it's got to evolve, right? It's not static, it's more dynamic than it's ever been. And to stand out in this sort of sea of generative AI that we're all going to live in, there's going to have to be some real strategic and creative focus. I see the creative industry becoming much more consultative and serving in a much stronger advisory capacity than just being the art department,
Yeah. Yeah,
which has been happening, but I think
totally.
it's going to go all the way.
Yeah. No, I mean, yeah, I'm seeing that as well. I'm curious though. Okay, so if I like let's say I'm an agency owner and I'm like I should be creating my own software. Would you agree with that, or are you like that's something that you should be doing, or or no, not so much?
I would say you should be building your own tools, um,
Okay.
and how you use them is is really the question, right? So uh, to give some clarity there, um, Sesame is used as much by our team as it is by our clients.
Hmm.
Um, the tooling just in that aspect alone has a lot of value. I have very, very senior creative directors that say, hey, for something that's quick turn, I'd rather be able to do it in Sesame than have to open up After Effects, locate the file, do the thing, and then produce the asset. It's saving me very, very precious time. So, and that's an efficiency. That's an efficiency play. I think that the real benefit of exploring making your own tools is the way in which it allows you to think about creativity, the creative process, and creative outputs. I think that there are aha moments where sort of the traditional process meets building a tool, making software that lead to again some real aha moments.
I love it. I love it. And then, I'll ask Richard this question. Um, if one, if someone has a team that's built for a certain type of digital product, but they want to get into this, like where do they start? Is it making sure that they're doing React? Like what should be in their initial toolkit?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a fair point. I mean, I just kind of yeah exposed that I'm a React fanboy, but I think honestly, just like I always go back to like one of my biggest career learnings was the idea of prototyping. Like I became very obsessed with that as a concept. That everything starts with a prototype. And I think Sesame sure as hell did. So I mean, I think that always kind of be making and always kind of be evaluating and never whatever tools, even if it's a paper prototype. I think, it's not really the idea of testing and putting things out there as is really important. And yeah, I mean, obviously, if you're an engineer or a developer, I think React is, very transformative in terms of, it's very easy and there's so much resources and tutorials and things like that. But, there's tons of other frameworks that are, equally as impressive. So, yeah, I think prototyping is the biggest for me.
So
And
uh,
I think JavaScript is, I do think that prototyping and the power of JavaScript go kind of hand in hand. They allow you to move really, really fast with very, very little overhead.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, JavaScript is, yeah, isn't. I mean, I know a lot of people are using Python because of AI and things like that, but for me, yeah, JavaScript is. I just live and dream in it, so for sure.
And I'm curious too. Like, what are the other tools that you guys are seeing that you're excited by? I mean, like, are you looking at like things like Replit? Like is that how you even pronounce it? Like these things that'll just like build an app for you on the fly. Have you been kicking the tires on any of that stuff?
Uh, I mean, I'm a little bit more of a control freak, so I can't handle that to a certain extent. I mean, I
Fair, fair,
definitely
fair.
I think we definitely use Copilot. Like, I mean, I've used that for about 2 years, and it's I start typing one word and it's finished a chunk before I've even like. It's just wild how that's changed everything. Yeah, I've seen the large language models that are using React now that can just make an application for you. So yeah, it's wild. But I'm a little old school in that way. I very much like the control of things like being able to see things from start to finish and architecting things. But I'm getting there.
And you encouraging your like or like all of your developers, working with like AI Copilot at this point?
I think yeah, it's kind of mandatory at this point. The amount of efficiency is pretty wild. I was I was being a stick in the mud about it, and then yeah, it's pretty crazy. Just things like you would like, write an array, you start type, like the things that by the end of the day, the amount of hours it saved you, it's like you can compile a JSON, it would take you, 2 hours to do or something like that. It's kind of knows exactly what to do with it. It's just crazy. So,
Yeah, no, I
yeah.
love it. These are wild times. I mean, we're all surfing a big wave.
Yep.
So I think we're about at time. So I would just say, like, Jameson and Richard, are there any sort of parting words you want to like lead to the community, or ways that they can, support you, or any of the stuff that you're doing?
Well, I think a couple of things I would say. One, check out the links that I dropped in the chat, and again, I'm sure Josh will send those out. Play around with the demo that we've put out there. If you're interested, join the list. We'll get in touch with you. And the other thing is we're both very, very approachable people. Feel free to reach out to us on LinkedIn. We love just talking about this stuff. We love not only being able to tell people what we're up to, but hear what they're up to. So get in touch with us, and then we'd love to continue this conversation. I mean, I think that's the beauty of future spaces from my perspective is Josh and co have done an amazing job building community very, very quickly. And, let's engage, let's continue to just be a part of this community and, you know, uh, mix it up together.
Love it. I love it. Well, Jameson, Richard, thanks so much for this. This is a great way to end our week. I find this stuff like super, super inspiring. I love what you guys are doing. I will send all the links around. Let me know, if there's any ways that I can help or, keep things going. But thanks everybody for joining. I'll be sending out a newsletter shortly with next week's events. So hope to see you at a future spaces. All right. Thanks again, everybody.
Thank you.
All right, bye, all.